Our next presenter, direct from California, and Greg Stangl, and his company is Phoenix Energy, and they have 2 operations up and running in California at this point, and he's going to tell us the good, bad, and the ugly of bringing those systems to fruition. Greg, go ahead.
All right. Let's see how I... You know, when Commodore 64 was the thing, I really knew about computers here.
Exactly.
I'm telling you, people came to me for help, and... Oh, got it. Okay. All right. You know, less than the equipment, I'm going to try and talk about how I got my rear end handed to me in this business. So I'm going to give you just a brief thing on Phoenix, and then I'm going to try and tell you spend as much time focusing on the difficulties as possible. Please don't misunderstand. We love this business. We've been in it since 1999. And, you know, we feel like we've got a formula for moving forward, but I thought I'd do the most good by sharing my biggest, darkest, deepest concerns and the things that keep me up at night. So this is the first plant we built in California. We got started over in Europe, Eastern Europe or Central Europe, depending on your politics. And we actually got started because everybody was afraid the Russians were going to shut the gas off. So a lot of people with wood came to us and said, holy cow, the Russians are going to shut the gas off. What can you do to help? And that's really how we ended up in the gasification field. So this was our first plant in the United States, and you know, one of the bright spots was it took us about 2.5 years to get that permitted. We permitted our second unit in 4 months. So we've really made progress out there, and some of that 2.5 years was due to our ignorance. I'd never heard of a conditional use permit before. You know, I thought in the land of my birth, why would I need anybody's permission to do something on my own land? Like, I didn't think that topic kind of, well, suffice it to say, we're a lot more familiar with the permitting challenges, and we feel that's an area where we've really developed. Phoenix Energy, essentially what we are is private label power. We are not makers of technology. We are buyers and deployers of technology. If you like to be as brutal as possible, you'd probably be better off comparing us to real estate developers or systems integrators. We're the guys who go in, we find the site where it makes sense to do this. Biomass is very, very site specific, and we do build, own, operate, or most likely build, own joint venture with a site holder. We like to make smaller plants and take them to the place, just like the Roberts lumber mill, where the biomass is, where there's a demand for power. And thanks to the air districts kind of turning diesel equipment into sort of akin to smoking cigarettes, we're seeing a lot of interest now in self-gen. You know, right now for us, the all-in cost from the day we decide to do this to the day you're putting kilowatts on the grid, it's running us about $5.5 million a kW. That number was $4.5 million a megawatt, and that extra million is now going to the utilities. They just keep turning the screws, and that's just it's just a real. Yeah, we heard earlier about. Okay. Quick aside. So our second plant, the written estimate we have was $220,000 to interconnect. 13 months later, they handed us a ticket for $1.9 million, which was a similar experience we had with the first plant, and we beat them so hard that we thought they'd never do this again, and sure enough. The second trip through was worse. But lest I digress, or there be anybody from a utility present, and we're no longer just an energy company. I'm slightly embarrassed to admit that when we started, biochar was an afterthought. Biochar, because we were in a part of the world where they use a tremendous amount of coal for thermal applications. Everybody from hospitals to military bases has a coal burning furnace and a couple of guys in overalls in the basement. And we were deploying the biochar in that fashion. Biochar now accounts for about 40 to 50% of our revenue in the low season. And during the summer, when electricity is expensive, peak hours, it's maybe 20% of our revenue. But those are very meaningful numbers, and that's part of the challenge we're facing now as we're seeing interest move from the ag space into kind of the lower value sectors like forestry. Powerful forces driving demand. The air districts are really helping us out in terms of just trying to make diesel equipment go away. Energy's getting expensive, and we're seeing a lot of new regulations that are doing things like preventing organics going to the landfill. And actually in California, there's a great new push that they're mandating another 250 megawatts of small-scale distributed bioenergy. Now, that's not just for gasification, but in the forestry space where they've got to get 50 of these megawatts, it's hard to think of any other small-scale technology other than gasification that could be deployed. But you're going to hear about what some of those challenges are. The model you guys really know. Our whole thing is take small plants to where the resources are. Get retail on the power. You're going to lose if you're selling to the grid. Renewable energy is it's expensive. Our main focus is keeping the electricity local, keeping the heat local, and keeping the biomass local. Biochar we can move, but the key thing for us is keeping our outputs, as many of them as we can get, on site. This is our next one, just permitted. This is a 2 megawatt going into Lake Tahoe. We didn't do the drawing, the government did the drawing for us, so I'll show you all the things where physics gets violated. But that's what happens when you let government, oh boy, I hope they're not going to hear that. This is one of the samples I just wanted to talk about. So our next project going in is a 2 megawatt going into Lake Tahoe. Now we're seeing a lot of interest. Things like the rim fire happen. We see even more interest of communities in the forestry setting coming out and wanting to put projects like this in place. They had a sawmill in the 80s. There was a 6 megawatt interconnection in 1978. That's all gone now, and wouldn't it be nice if we could do this? Last year, I was excited, and I told everybody that we really thought we had nailed the debt capital thing. We had genuine banks you would have heard us, give us 75% debt, a 90-10 construction loan. I'm not saying we got no recourse financing, but we were getting access to capital. That's largely based on your economics being based on a 20-year PPA, which you can waive. That's a very creditworthy off-taker. The issue we're having now is you can see that more and more of the returns are based on biochar. And what I can't deliver and what everybody wants is that show me that 10-year contract for biochar. And if I had one, I wouldn't be showing it to the bank because I'd be selling out a Merced and I'd be selling out a Modesto on a long-term contract. But we're still pretty much in the spot market. We love the prices, it's all spot transactions. Estimated project costs in Tahoe, given now that we're doing this at 6,500 feet, there's a lot less oxygen in the atmosphere. You need bigger turbos, you need more engines to do the same job. And that's how we're figuring that our 5.5 is going to go up. 5.5 a megawatt, we're going to see it go up still further. A lot of the reason the returns are so attractive is because we're landing on that big tax equity number. That 30% investment tax credit Issues that we're having here, it's too small for the banks and too big for the dentists. It is actually a challenging number to find placement for tax equity in that sort of a chunk. While the government puts those tax credits out there, they're actually quite difficult for normal people to use. Real estate income qualifies unless you're a professional real estate investor. It's hard to find someone that has $3.7 million in real estate income that is not a professional real estate investor. Investment qualifies. It's hard to find someone who has $3.7 million worth of dividend income that's not a professional investor. So that tax equity actually gets to be pretty challenging to find a home for. But the steady contracted cash flows, it's that annuity revenue that your economics professor in school told you to find in life. That has really helped us. So now let's talk about the challenges. No contract for char is no financing for char. So when you find your model is now 40% dependent on the char revenues, and they come in and say, well, let's just assume that's zero. There aren't that many financial models that survive a 40% haircut, even the ones that I write. And you know what they say about models. I never saw a number that didn't look good, because it's so easy to make them look good. Same thing on the wood chips. Now, banks are insisting on contracts for fuel for the length of the loan. 10-year contracts for wood chips, I'm telling you, they don't exist. Each time we've done it synthetically. So in essence, we've found a way to sort of recreate by basically finding someone who was willing to take that risk off of our books for a modest fee, but that we would get a contract for the provision of wood, where we found that trick worked with wood, and people who were very familiar with it did not work with biochar, or has not worked with biochar yet. Banks haven't heard of char, and our investors pretend not to have heard of char. But again, that's the biggest challenge, I tell you, that we're facing right now today, is finding a way to make char bankable. How do we make char bankable? And by bankable, what I mean is an offtake agreement for any length of time from a credit-worthy counterparty. We already thought of setting up our own subsidiary to give ourselves a contract to buy the char, and that doesn't quite get the job done. So what's interesting is that the increased value of char is actually working against us from a financial perspective. We're right now at 79 cents by the truckload. We sell everything that we can make. We are higher than that, obviously, for less than truckload loads, which I tell you is about half of what goes out our door is LTL. Half of what goes out by the truckload. 90% of that is into the ag markets. We do not really believe that to be the future. We believe the future is going and eating activated carbon's lunch.
79 cents per unit?
A pound, 79 cents a pound, dry pound, is what we're seeing on the biochar. Now, interestingly, we started running peach pits out of our Modesto plant, and that stuff is so heavy, when we first weighed it, we thought there must have been a problem, so we sold it to them as if it had been a 550-pound bag of wood. Well, I only did that once. But you know, right now the prices seem to be holding. I mean, when we started, biochar was 2 cents a pound, and these conferences were a lot more thinly attended. There's a lot of people here today. There was a lot of people here last year, people that you wouldn't think have any business being here. Google was here. You know, that tells me we're going to see a lot more char. So do we hold at 79 cents? Do we see that next year? You know, I don't know. I mean, it's been going up a ski slope in reverse. It's been great. It's been the hockey stick, or whatever you like to call it. But that's really been that's really been helpful, and it makes up for a lot of utility abuse for us who are on the CH&P model. Lack of standards will inhibit the growth of getting char out there. We've heard it before. We hear it mostly among family at this event. All biochars are not the same. They are not created equal. But we go into the market, everybody's selling biochar. The wrong standards will crush it. We need the standards, and at the same time, I'm petrified of them. And then, how long is it going to take us to make biochar creditworthy? When we got started in Europe, it was a 2-year trip. Well, we've been doing this for a lot longer than 2 years here in the United States, and we're still getting absolutely zero on the char without a contract. And then, yeah, I guess I missed the one in the beginning. Is supply growth going to outpace demand growth? That concerns me. I think each and every one of us needs to be really working hard to make sure we get biochar out there in as many markets. We're right in the agricultural heartland of America. We sell absolutely nothing in that heartland. All of our biochar goes to either Southern California, Oregon, Washington, Virginia, Florida. I mean, those are not long-term markets for us, because when you're shipping popcorn, it's just not long for the world. They maybe don't Google enough to find other sources. But I'm amazed at how few very big farmers have not heard of it. Our near-term tactics, eating activated carbon's lunch. Activated carbon is a $2 billion market projected to go to $4 billion. There are laws on the books requiring stormwater filtration in Portland, in Sacramento. All stormwater must be filtered before it goes into the bay. We're going to transition our country from putting signs about not dumping your motor oil in the storm drain, which people stopped doing a long time ago. Now we're going to do something more, which is to start filtering it. This is a huge opportunity for low-cost biochar relative to $1.49 activated coconut shell carbon bought by municipal governments coming from Asia, focused on fast-growing markets and key legislation. Again, I'm amazed at how many cities are putting in stormwater filtration. You've got a lot of, you've got the Yakima Valley in Washington, you've got Portland, you've got Sacramento going into the Delta, you've got San Francisco going into the Bay down there, where they're really getting serious about, you've seen the rain, you've seen the sheen of motor oil as it's running down the street into your storm drain. That goes into the water, and I think that's a real opportunity for us. We're trying to reduce the dependence on ag. Again, I'm here to tell you 90% of our sales today are into ag, but that's a focus for us. And quality, quality, quality. We are absolutely focused on making sure we have the best quality product we can deliver. Yeah, and that's all. So happy to take any questions.
Out there? It seems like a lot of this model is really dependent on good programs available in California. So I'm in the coal fields of eastern Kentucky, where I'm looking at doing similar types of systems on former mountaintop removal sites of both ecosystem remediation and hopefully economic redevelopment in an area that has been really tied to one industry, namely coal mining. But of course, as a very unprogressive state, we have very little in the way of the types of incentive programs that California has. I'm just wondering if you guys have looked at states like ours that don't have as progressive models, if there are ways to tap into these types of incentives that are actually...
We very much have. We very much have. We had a whole delegation from the state of Alabama troop out and tell us how Alabama is 80% forested, and all the sawmills and paper mills went to South America, and power's a nickel, and we can't help you. We cannot help you where power is a nickel. We talk about this top down, and we talk about how we could put these on every landfill in America. Our type of CH&P systems, because remember, you need all this whole side of the equipment, that's all about making power. That's all. I'll tell you right now, this plant is about $5 million to be a megawatt. That's 400,000. That's all you need to make char. The whole rest of it, including the extortion money to the utilities to get put on the grid. So there's an argument to say, and follow me while I ruin myself for any investor who might be here. If 90% of my capital cost is about making electricity, but 50% of my revenue is from char, am I really serving myself by making power? And you know, that's something we've all got to think about, because I bet if you were to focus on the char only model, there's probably a way to get started now and not wait for, because remember, even in California we have 11, 12 cent power. I don't get that. I don't even want that, because I sell to the guy on site who's running his processing plant for peach pits, and he's paying 20 cents a kilowatt for power. So there's a lot more room in there.
I'll just do one real quick follow-up. I haven't heard anybody talk about upgrading pathways like Fischer-Tropsch synthesis and liquid fuels. My understanding is that that's probably not economically viable just because of the cost of production. Has anybody run any numbers on some of those more advanced upgrading pathways?
We definitely have. We make a flammable gas. What happens to it after we make it, I do not care. I'm an economist. We'd be happy to turn it into liquids if we felt, and there's an argument that turning it into liquids gets you around any air district you want. All the problems we had in permitting go away if you're making 55-gallon drums. I'm sure there are other problems that come, but you don't have the California Air Resources Board, you don't have the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District. Those are pretty tough. You know, they're fair people, but they're pretty tough hoops to jump through. And I promise you we would do it if we felt it made more economic sense.
Great talk, thank you. $2,000 a ton, that's pretty sweet. But Lenny told us he's only getting $250 a ton, and I'm just kind of curious.
I'm going to buy every flippin' thing Lenny can make. I'm going to take it all. I'm going to take it all.
Are you seeing other spot prices around the country? Are there any other producers of any volume? Is there a market yet?
There are people who charge a lot more than I do, and I would charge more if I could. You know, I think when you roll in the transportation economics, it's real, and it's still a very, very imperfect market. I mean, why are people in Florida buying from us? It makes no sense. I mean, we love our Florida customers, in case they're listening, but that's a short-lived proposition, and I think we're just dealing with the fact that this is still a very immature market.
Greg, follow up on your 90-10 split on your costing. Why don't we just go with the 400 to 500K char only unit? Where are the investors on that? And related to that, for those in the room that are intrigued with this discussion at 3:30 in a room down the hallway, we've got a whole session on commercializing biochar, where we're going to try to be a little provocative about what I call crossing the valley of death between R&D success and commercial failure.
Right. I mean,
why don't we just go with the char only unit?
Look, I think it's going to take the same thing I need in these forestry projects, right? It's going to take, who's your offtake? Show me a credit-worthy offtaker. Show me somebody who's bankable, who will write you a contract for your product and or service. And so when I tell you this piece right here costs $500,000, and you know, okay, so let's say it's going to be $1 million, $1.5 million by the time you're done, and you pay the concrete and the labor and the what have you. It's still, you know, again, $5 million, now $5.5 million, and this, let's say I could do just that for $1 million. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't done it, but so say it's $1 million.
So you need a take-or-pay contract on the char side.
I am hearing that message. so loud and so clear that I'm spending much more time on it in this talk than I thought I would have, because I heard it both from an investor group last week and from a bank. Which is, this is a great deal. We love it. Greg, you got a track record. We think this is phenomenal. This is plant number 3. You're just rolling them out. Where's the contract?
It's the usual risk averse.
I don't have one.
So how about more patient investors? How about coming for slow
Yeah.
money?
I mean, look, I like to brag that we've been in this business since 1999. We've never taken a government grant.
No, I'm not talking about grants. There are philanthropic foundations that are willing to invest. There are also individuals who don't want their money on Wall Street. That's the slow money crowd. The prior is the patient capital crowd.
We just started working with a fund which purports to do just that. Let's see how it turns out. I mean, you got to kiss a lot of frogs when you're looking for money. So, to find the prince, I didn't mean we love our investors. We love them. But we just started that process. We'll see if that is in any way fruitful. But I think really, if we want to turn this into an industry, we have to deal with the capital markets as they exist. And yes, maybe a couple of us will get something done because somebody's going to get a grant from DOE, and somebody's going to find that guy who really doesn't want to make a return or isn't interested in getting his money back in his lifetime. And we're looking for those guys too. But we've got to get this stuff into the capital markets as they exist today. And the message that I am getting beaten into me is, great, show me the contract. Show me the reliable offtake. And so, okay, who are the reliable offtakes? Is it, I'm afraid to mention this name in this room, is it ConAgra? Is it Dole? Is it Del Monte? Is it Home Depot? Is it who's the guy who writes that? And I think we're making progress. There are people who are in Home Depot today. There's the Happy Cat Biochar who is I saw on Williams Sonoma. So that's maybe that's something. Maybe that we can turn into a contract.
Assuming that you become phenomenally successful, yes. How much is there on the demand side? How much is there on the supply side? How big could things get?
I keep coming back to activated carbon is a $2 billion market with a B. Even if ag is, how big is ag? I haven't the slightest clue. If ag right now is a $500,000 a year market, or a $2 million, or a $10 million, that's not going to help us build an industry. We need something with a B in front of it, and our carbon has lots of uses. It can go into lots of processes. I mean, everything from toner ink to, I think we all have to get a lot more creative about where we are seeking to deploy this valuable resource. The reclamation of mines, and we're obviously looking at filtration mainly because, hey, I need a market where it is a consumable item, right? My best customer in ag, is he going to buy from me again? I mean, they've bought from me 3 times, but that's because they put another 1,000 acres of citrus in, and so they needed more. Well, they're not going to need more biochar for that field next year. And they've even called to report that they're skipping irrigations. That's a huge story. I mean, the customer called us to say, my grower thought this was all BS, and I just want to let you know that now he's calling me to tell me he skips an irrigation. In California, that is big news. Big news, but nobody knows about it except for that customer and me. So I'm failing in what I'm asking all of us to do, which is, we got our work cut out for us to get that word out.
Let's think a little bigger. Suppose for a variety of reasons fossil fuels go away. How much biomass potentially do we have to supply energy?
If we used only the consulting studies that tell us how much wood is in the forest, and we stacked them all up and we used those for fuel, we would probably cover transportation in America for a couple of years. I think there is, and we also need to be careful. We need to be stewards of the land, and our ability to deploy these assets is based on the fact that the environmental community supports us, not opposes us. The same people who get up and protest the 20 megawatt biomass plant in Modesto, where unemployment is like the Middle East. It's it's 22% unemployment. They're trying to put in a power plant, done, killed. These are the people who are supporting the smaller, the sustainable. I mean, the consciousness has changed. So I think we also need to be careful that we don't spin it out of control, but there's plenty of wood in a forest.
Two more questions. Go ahead. Right here.
What would be the initial cost to activate the char?
Okay, two things on this. We've looked at this intently. There's chemical activation, there's steam activation. The incremental cost is not meaningful, and there are actually some very interesting people at this conference who have systems to do the secondary processing. I've spoken to a couple of them. My thing is, how much char do you lose? And if I'm getting 79 cents today and virgin coconut shell sells in Richmond, California for $1.49 a pound, and I lose 50% of the volume of char that I have in the activation process, well, now I've just lost money. So I don't think it's as much in the cost of the equipment. I think it's more in the how does it change what you have left to sell? Do you add enough value to it over where we are right now as is?
One more in the back there.
And have you checked on the flame retardants and pesticides and heavy metal residues in the biosolids that you're?
Absolutely, yeah. We test religiously. Our customers insist on it, and it's important to us that we can get out there and speak to what we have. I'll tell you, the only thing we seem to struggle with from time to time is arsenic. Arsenic is a huge problem. Most of the water fountains are shut off in California Central Valley soils. There is a lot of arsenic in the soil. So that occasionally has gotten too close to the IBI limit for our comfort. That said, no, there's no heavy metal in a peach pit, and there's no heavy metals in wood chips. But yeah, I mean, the secret to that for us is we test regularly. We use Frank at Soil Control Labs. I'm so disappointed that he's not here. I brought some more char for him to test. Tell his boss he should have come. But yeah, so testing and testing again.
One more that was, you had your hand up before. Go ahead.
Do you know of vendors now that are using biochar to develop stormwater quality devices?
Sort of. And if you have any other names, I'd be glad to take them off you. But we are working with a number of fairly sizable cities on the West Coast. It is in the early stages. It's at the bench scale stage. It's at the, I'll buy a pound from you. Nevada is doing work. California is doing work. There are some cities in the Pac Northwest. Our char is now at a port in the Pacific Northwest for stormwater.
But it's the cities that are developing. It's not like a third-party vendor creating
No. For us, it's all been the end customer, basically. It's been the municipalities, and they've been local governments. It's not the states. Or, again, look, we're just making our push here, so we're ignorant, and we're trying to get smart. But the people we're working with now, it's all local governments.
Greg, just a comment
water. We've got 8 demonstration projects in the Pacific Northwest, and they're cities and ports, and they're being designed by environmental engineers that have, or environmental engineering companies that have graduates that have worked with Biochar doing graduate student projects in water quality. So that's kind of how it's evolving, but there's a huge demand, as you alluded to before, for low impact design. Pierce County around Seattle is planning 3 million cubic yards of stormwater low impact design installations in the next 2 or 3 years. 40% of that will be compost. We add biochar to that. We improve the filtration. So you do the math. There's a growing market.
Yeah, yeah. And if we're not selling into that in 3 months, it's, you know whose fault it is. It's Tom Miles. There you go. All right. Well, thank you all very much. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me.
Greg, you certainly have an interesting story to tell, and the good, bad, and the ugly wasn't as bad as you made it out to be. You've done a fine job with what you're doing, so congratulations. Anybody else have anything? Call it a day.